Hey, what's up, everybody? Joshua Casper back at you with Plugin Boutique, and we got another live stream today. And as with the whole month of April, we're going to be talking about music for film and video games. And today, specifically, it's going to be about trailers. We're going to be joined by Jez and Josh from HiFinesse Trailer House. And they've done some work on some really amazing properties, including Thor, Avengers, the Stephen King It movies, and so on. The most recent ones, obviously. And they've been, Jez specifically has been in the scene for many, many years and has an incredible wealth of knowledge to bring to us. So I'm going to bring them in a second. But as usual, go ahead and post your comments and your questions in the chat. And towards the end of our conversation, we're going to bring those in and ask the gentlemen if they can respond to everything that we got in there. So, Jez, Josh, how are you today?
Good morning or evening or middle of the night, whatever it may be. We're well, thank you.
Just getting my first cup of tii in, or second cup of tea in here in Los Angeles. It's still a little early. So.
Let's keep it honest now, Jez. Let's keep it on right from the get-go.
Well, 10 a.m. in LA, musician time. I mean, that might as well be, 3 in the morning.
That's true. So you're in LA, 10 o'clock. I'm in Brazil, 2 o'clock. And our friend Joel Manning, the system, is in the UK, which is 6 o'clock. So we've got the whole world pretty much covered at this point. But thank you for joining us so early. As he said, musician time. This is probably way earlier than he's ever been up in years. But again, thanks for joining. And I think a good place to start is just to let you both kind of introduce yourselves and introduce HiFinesse as the company. Probably start with you, Jez, and then float it over to Josh, who's on more of the composition side, while you're more of the manager side these days. But if you want to just let us know about HiFinesse and both of you, maybe a little bit of history and what you're doing currently in the company, that would be a good place to start, I believe.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and keep it brief. So I started HiFinesse in 2008 and started small, just to work with a couple of composers that I knew from the film world and from video games. And spent the next 2 or 3 years building up a very small catalogue of music. It was extremely ripe territory back then. There weren't that many music companies specializing in making music for trailers. It was a relatively new genre. Of course, that's all changed now. And I think I met Josh. Josh was introduced to me by another composer I was working with when you were working at Native Instruments back in those days.
Yeah, that was about 10 years ago.
Yeah, so we started working together and immediately clicked and became partners in crime in terms of music and sound design and stuff. And since then, I guess HiFinesse, just from a big picture perspective, we've never been a huge company when it comes to the number of composers that we work with. Try to keep it boutique and small. And for me, that's been an essential part of our success, keeping the quality high and the focus on more progressive, newer types of music, trying to be ahead of the curve or even create some trends. So over the years, we've kind of accumulated as a company maybe 10 or 12 core composers, maybe a few less. And then we have a much wider network of composers that we reach out to for specific jobs, specific albums if they're really, really niche. So in the company, I was composing and spending about 90% of my time making music and 10% on client and project development. And these days, it's about 97% managing the label, talking with composers, looking for opportunities. We can talk more about that later. But about 3% actually making music these days, which I wish it was a little bit more balanced, but someone's got to helm the ship, I guess.
And Josh, what about you? What is your sort of role at the company? Maybe a little bit more about your history, where you came from before you got into trailers specifically.
Sure. So I'm full-time composer for I do the opposite. If you take what Jez, his 97.3, I'm exactly the opposite of that. I'm In fact, maybe it's even just 100% of composing. We met about 10 years ago. I come mostly from a music tech background. I did software development in college, and then I worked in that world for probably 12 years or so. And then I worked for a while in music retail and music. I worked for Native Instruments for a while in their product and marketing departments. And so I come sort of half and half, technical and creative. And when Jez and I met, it just turned out that my background, the technical aspects of my background worked out really well for this kind of industry, because, you know, it requires a lot of technical juggling and short turnarounds and things. And we can talk about that in a little more detail in a moment. But it seemed to be a really good fit for me at the time. And I started with just a couple things, doing a few things, small projects for Jez, and then it just sort of took off from there, and it seemed to snap really well. So then I went from technical, mixture of technical and creative, to full creative. And that's been kind of the journey in my career journey. And I think that's worth mentioning, because I think there are a lot of other people out there who are also not doing creative full time right now, but would like to get into that. We can address some ways. We can talk about that a little bit more. But that's my background.
That's wonderful. I actually was checking out the site, obviously, HiFinesse.com. It's .com, right, Jez?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So everybody that's watching, definitely go check out the website, because first of all, just the list of credits on your website it makes anyone's jaw drop. And I first of all, I noticed from there's 2009 is where your credits begin. And there's just a few, but still really big titles right off the bat. And I'm sure that's because you were an already very accomplished music producer before then. So you probably had someone that was, hey, do you want to try it or something? I don't really know how it all worked then. But you started off quite small, even with some really big names. And then the credit list year by year just goes insane. And then around 2014, there is 120 credits for that year, Jez. Talk me through that. How is that humanly possible? I mean, that's a trailer every 3 days or something. Like, that's just an insane amount of work. And if maybe you could walk us through that, and I believe that will lead us into how trailers are kind of made these days, which I think is kind of a hidden truth. A lot of people don't realize how trailers are made. So maybe tell me about how is 120 credits possible in 1 year? Just to start there.
Well, I won't say that's misleading, because it's not, because they're all legitimate credits. You know, every single one of those credits is a project that we licensed music to. But the way that trailers are made and the utilization of music, it's not really always a case that they're using a single piece of music from beginning of end to end of the trailer or the TV spot. And going back to 2014, there was a huge surge of TV advertising for film and TV shows, and TV spots became more prevalent in the industry in general. And so some of these big, like Marvel, for example, was releasing 20 or 30 even discrete TV spots for big campaigns. So there were a lot of opportunities. That doesn't explain, obviously we don't list 20 or 30 credits for like a Thor trailer. We just list one. So there were even more placements than that, I guess, in reality, happening behind the scenes, because some of these bigger tentpole movies would have used 3, 4, 5 of our music cues. But a lot of them would just use 5 or 10 seconds of a cue at the beginning, and then move on to another cue, and then another cue, and have 4 or 5 different pieces of music. So I think when we started off, and certainly in the early 2010s, the general style of production in trailers was to use at least 3 pieces of music for a big 2.5 minute trailer, not for a TV spot. So there were a lot of opportunities to place a lot of music, and that kind of changed in the mid-2015 area, and there was a movement to use, I mean, from my experience, there was a trend to use fewer discrete tracks in the trailer, and focus on one cue that worked from beginning to end of a trailer, or maybe two at the very most. And there was a lot of client demand for that. So that put a different focus on how we created cues at the time, but that's a whole different story. So yeah, honestly, when you just mentioned 120 cues and 120 placements in a year, I don't remember 10% of them. They're just for me, and it kind of, I look back and I'm kind of incredulous as to how it all happened. I don't really know how it happened. Can't explain it. Hard work, good talent that we work with, and a lot of luck. Getting noticed.
I mean, it's really quite incredible. And then the titles in there are just, again, they're AAA all the way down, and it's just like, wow. And I wanted to kind of bring that up because before, I mean, I talked to Jules Bromley. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? And he's run a UK trailer house called Evolving Sound. And we talked about how trailers are made. And I didn't know personally that when I think of a trailer being made, I think a studio comes and says, all right, we're going to have a blockbuster superhero movie. We want thrilling, we want, subtle beginning, thrilling, make me something. But it seems like a lot is done through music libraries that you created beforehand, which you allow them access to, and then they can pick and choose which one they're going to license, and then you get the placement and so on. So I didn't know that was the case. So I was wondering if it's, kind of what your split is, and maybe Josh could field this one, between just producing something in your mind. I'm going to do Creepy this week. Between that and having something specific, a specific request that comes from a studio to get something done. Like, what's the split? And, I guess just maybe start there and we can take it from there, Josh.
Yeah, sure. So essentially what you're asking is how much of the stuff comes from a catalog just off the shelf without much involvement from us versus someone hands us a concept that we create custom material for.
Yes, exactly.
And that, it's funny because it vacillates. I mean, we've had periods where, I mean, I've been 4 months, just nonstop custom. The custom request won't stop. We have this concept. I get a brief for this, get a brief for that. And then conversely, there's been droughts of custom where I've just been working purely on creating catalog content. It varies. I mean, over time, if you look at the long game, it probably averages out to probably be 50-50, I would say. But at any given moment, it does weigh more toward one or the other. And a lot of that has to do with the season. When you start getting the summer blockbuster season, it's all action stuff, action. And especially for those action campaigns when they release some TV spots, but then, you'll get the Peter Travers of the Rolling Stones says, and they need those 30-second prestige things. They don't have time. They want to capitalize on that tidal wave. So they need something really quickly. So it depends a lot on sort of what's happening at the time. But yeah, I mean, people are really surprised. I mean, I think that a lot of composers who are getting into trailers think that we've cut the trailer. Now we just need someone to add the music, and then give the composer picture, and the composer works to picture, and there's time code, and you're doing the whole thing. I mean, how many times would you say someone has given us picture to score to in the last? I mean, sometimes
in the last decade, maybe 10 times.
Yeah. Out of hundreds and hundreds, and even then, it's not really because you're going to score to it from start to finish, but it's more just like, hey, here's the vibe, or here's what we're trying to do. But because the the film is not done. I mean, when they're doing the trailer, I mean, they have, even the times we do get pictures, sometimes there'll be blank frames, green screen, no audio, this kind of stuff. It's not done. They are literally cutting the trailer to the material. So yeah, that's kind of how it works, and it's all over the place between custom and off the shelf.
I think that's right. A lot of people would assume that, but I think if you give it a little bit of critical thought, it makes much more sense. Like if you're animating a cartoon's mouth, you do that after you have the dialogue, because doing it the other way around is 20 million times harder. So it makes sense to kind of have your trailer score and then know where the beats are, explosion time, melodramatic time, and this sort of thing, kind of like a sketch, and then maybe request sort of a change here or a change there, or give me the stem so I can remove this sort of thing. So I mean, it makes sense, but it was surprising. I will be honest. That's really cool.
Yeah, surprised us.
Yeah.
We got into it.
I saw on the site too that you guys actually collaborated on Thor Ragnarok's teaser trailer. That's what it says on the site. And it says featuring the Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin with additional enhancements. Walk me through what that means, and maybe give me a little bit about being able to, I don't know how much you did to the song, but that is a pretty, how do you say, famous song, and to be able to work with it or around it and just be associated with it, I imagine is pretty just cool from a creative person's perspective. Maybe talk to me about how the studio came to you, what they requested, what they said they needed, and how you responded, and what you guys actually did in terms of the final product there. I think that would be a cool story to hear.
So yeah, this was an instance where we weren't approached directly by the studio, but by a trailer house in LA. The 98% of our requests, so the major studios have the in-house marketing creative departments, but the majority of work we do is with independent marketing companies, most of them in Los Angeles. And this was a particular company we work with quite a lot. And they came to us and said, hey, we want to use this song. It's being used in the movie. But we also realized that there are some limitations with this particular song in terms of how it's arranged, how it builds. And we don't need much. We just want to be able to, take it over the finishing line and provide something that has some sections in it that perform in a specific way, like an intro that's really moody and ambient that doesn't exist in the original track. And then that could be a different cue, original cue. And then in the middle, we needed to do this and break down. And can you help us achieve that sonically? And in the end, it just needs to lift a little bit and be given a little bit of oomph. So everything we did on that particular remix is very, very subtle. It's almost difficult to even tell. And that's why I didn't call it a remix on that particular posting. As we do, there are some very big, solid remixes on some other cues, and we should talk about perhaps the Kong trailer, which is more exciting to talk about than this particular instance that you picked. But basically, it was a pretty easy, seamless, transparent, additional kind of production elements that we added to it that just helped the editor and the producer get what they wanted out of the cue.
There's a lot of engineering stuff to that kind of thing, because if you think of it, and this happens quite frequently, where someone will pull a track off the shelf that was recorded in the 60s, the dynamic range and the frequency range, are not suitable for 11.1 or something when you're going to sit in a so they a lot of times they want enhancements in the frequency spectrum. It's as much engineering as it is creative. Especially if you take a Led Zeppelin track, you're going to want those drums to just pop in a way that if it were recorded today, and so a lot of engineering type things, a lot of enhancing the drums, doubling up the guitars, for example, things that if you could get an engineer to go back and re-record that song, with no holds barred, but what they might have done, if it were 2021, so stuff like that.
So is the re-engineering, the remixing, the remastering, is that your wheelhouse as well?
I mean, yeah, you have to. I mean, the main thing to emphasize is there is no time.
Yeah.
When it comes to trailers, I mean, it's not gonna be like, oh well, we've got this thing coming up in 3 months. Let's book this studio. Hey, let's get this person. Let's get that person. It's like you've got to wear a lot of hats that that are pure creative, that are in between, that are engineering, that are all over the place. Computer-based things. It's a lot of hats, and so I think that's a skill set that helps a lot with that.
Yeah, when they do send down a request, and we are talking about time crunches here, are we talking hours, or are we talking a day? How quickly are we talking usually?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
For a custom thing, I mean, if it's a custom thing and it's not something that we're doing to put into the catalog, I think the longest on a custom thing is, I mean, that we ever see is like 4 days or something, 5 days. Like,
sometimes a week for those are really exceptional.
Yeah,
normally,
unless it goes on, yeah. But I mean, I've had things where I'm down at my coffee shop in line, and you know, I get a call from Jez, and he's like, they have this piano thing, it's not working, they got to replace it. You know, they're hoping to get something, you know, end of day, and it's like, and then I get out of line and I get back in my car. You know, it's like, you know, that's some frequency, and you do it because, you know, it's that or nothing. I mean, you know, it's like they're going to do it, they're going to finish it. They're not going to go, well, we'll wait until this guy is available. You know, no, that's not going to happen. You know, it's you're always competing.
When we get that call, email, and hopefully we're the only people that are being asked if that we can work on this particular project by a music supervisor. Or producer at a trailer house. Usually I try and get them an answer within 15 minutes, and I have to ask myself several questions in that short amount of time, because I owe it to our client to be able to serve them and make sure that we can give them the best that we can. And we only take on projects that we're pretty convinced we can do really well, and sometimes the time doesn't allow for that, so we turn them down based on the amount of time that they give us and move on. And you know, the tendency is to want to grab everything you possibly can and try and take every gig, but long term as a strategy, that doesn't work. I don't think that it creates any sense of reliability, and certainly doesn't help the client out who are relying on us. And you know, we like to try and think that we're the only company they're coming to if they're working on something, and especially if it's a spec job. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're going out to somebody else. And sometimes it's a cattle call, but it's one of the most challenging things for me in a very short amount of time is to evaluate the project, ask myself authentically, can we provide what they're looking for in this amount of time, and will it be really good? And if any of those categories of questions bring up a negative, then it's sorry, but can you call your next person? Response.
No, that's understandable, and making those decisions is what's gotten you to where you are today. So nothing but respect for that. I mean, that is something that I'm sure is difficult, especially if it's a huge project that you'd love to be associated with. Maybe the paycheck is out of this world, but sometimes you got to do it. You got to say no, and that's, you know, I get it, and you're doing a really good job at it, Jez. It looks like you you wanted to mention something about the Kong trailer. The reason why I had brought up the Ragnarok because it seemed like a collaboration between you two. Do you collaborate frequently? Did you collaborate on the Kong trailer?
We did a very minimal amount of collaboration on the Kong trailer.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I would say there was a sizable collaboration because of that ending bit. Yeah, they wanted to take the animals track, you know, from the 60s, you know,
we've got to get
out of this place if it's the last thing we ever do. But they wanted to just go bombastic, you know, crazy, and we're thinking like, well, how are we going to do this? And it's like, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We just started with the main riff, like just slowed down, like dun, dun, you know, and really slow, and then picking up, and then speeding up, and then into the track, and then duck back out. And then here comes this middle section with a bunch of sound design, and here, you know, pound with a bunch of synth stuff, and then out again, and then back in for this back end where Jez is like, we're gonna get a choir, and they're gonna go, you know, I mean, this kind of thing. So, I mean, because of the nature of the project, because it was fun, you know, it wasn't like a Dark Knight project or something where we've got to be very serious. It was the spirit from the producer and the editor that was very fun. So we were able to just pull out all the stops and do that kind of just all over the place, fun, no holds barred kind of thing. But it was the choir thing was all Jez, and that's
well, okay, I'll put things in perspective. It was really 4 or 5 singers in my tiny little home studio, all you know, overdubbing each other with different styles of voices and different deliveries and different octaves and different harmonies. But that was actually an afterthought. On this particular project, the editor did an amazing job with the remix that Josh did. And when we gave, as he was explaining, when we gave the first round of remix to the client, we weren't really sure how they were going to use it. They had identified some specific sections that they wanted to have in the remix to be better use energetically in certain parts of the trailer. But they kind of, you know, we gave them basically a a remix that we had that wasn't necessarily linear. They just had all these sections.
Right.
We didn't really know how they were going to use it. They did very specifically say that they wanted to be able to cut rhythmically to it, so that the percussive components were really important. But when we saw the final result, I was blown away about how the editor took some of the stems in certain instances and worked those.
Totally.
And it became a very, very strong example of what they now has come to be termed a rhythmic trailer, which is a weird one for me because I think all trailers are very rhythmic anyway. But there's this style that's now has emerged recently that is referred to as the rhythmic trailer, and it's very prevalent, and especially with action TV spots and trailers, where the editor's fast cutting with sound design to a music bed that has already established that pulse or those syncopated rhythms, and that determines the pacing of the visual edit. And the Kong trailer for us was really a highlight in terms of that style of production, and it was, as a result, it's being referenced a lot over the years. Over the last, I think we did about 3 years ago, and since then, we've had clients and editors and music supervisors call us up and say, "Hey, you know what you did for that Kong trailer? Can you have something like that for this?"
And when one instance, someone said, "Well, we're looking to get the Kong thing," without realizing that we're the ones who did it.
Well, you came to the right people.
But yeah, we gave them so much stuff that they were able to really just pare down what they wanted and rearrange things, and it's and that's something really important about trilogies. The editors, you don't have a filmmaker doing the trilogy, because the filmmaker is doing the actual film. It falls on the editor to put this stuff together, and some editors are just the editor is doing the music editing, the dialogue, the sound effects, the actual cut itself. Trailer editors really do an amazing thing. It falls on them.
Absolutely. I wanted to, you just brought up the fact that you had a choir. You made a 4 or 5 person choir turn into, an entire church ensemble. But how often do you turn to actual musicians or an actual orchestra to play these orchestral pieces, and versus everything in box and just done with, a nice contact library and so on?
Yeah, it's going back to this theme. There's no time. Every once in a while, we get someone to come in. If it's something that's really difficult to do with samples, like obviously a choir singing specific words to a specific pop track with definite articulations. That's got to be the real thing. There's no fudging that. And then we'll occasionally get someone to do like guitar. Specific guitar riffs that because with samples you can chug, get the kind of like metal chugging type stuff. But if you want, sometimes there's like a really specific lead line or something. We have a guitarist that can lay that kind of thing down. But far and away, the vast majority of the time, it's in the box. 99% of the time.
So sometimes we'll get a cellist or a violinist to play a top line and sweeten something. Yeah. And if there's an articulated performance specific to the style, like it's an intimate drama type production, then obviously it's worthwhile paying somebody who's able to come in and nail it, rather than try to program that stuff with a VST.
Sure.
And then I guess the other we work with some vocalists as well. And those are more artist-driven projects for the most part. We did a fantastic collaboration. 2 collaborations with Natasha Atlas a few years ago. They've been super successful and got some great placements from. And she's this Egyptian-British singer who sings in a Middle Eastern sort of style. And she's incredible and very cinematic anyway. And we've had some wonderful placements from the stuff we did with her.
Definitely. And those were concepts, where it's like, we're going to do a specific release that kind of features, her vocals. But in terms of like, client spec, it's rare to have the time, the opportunity.
No one's ever come back to us. I've heard of other stories from some of our friends out there who do what we do, that clients come back to them and say, "Well, can we get an orchestra to record this now?" And that's never happened to us, luckily. And then I've heard of stories where that's actually happened, and they've gone back to the MIDI performance because it just didn't. When they recorded live orchestra, it just felt too nuanced or too flighty. It didn't have balls of what the
Right.
had.
So on the topic, obviously we're Plugin Boutique, and we deal with synths and libraries and so on. What are some of your go-tos that are getting heavily featured in some of the biggest trailers of all time? Like, I'm sure it's a lot of Contact libraries in there, but if there are any synths as well, like what are you using on the day-to-day for these things?
Yeah, I mean, Contact is the main sampler. As far as the orchestral libraries, it's Cinesample stuff, primarily on the orchestral side. On the hybrid side, it's Keep Forest, a lot of Heaviosity. I would say those three things probably account for 80-90% of stuff. I also have some Hallian libraries that I use. I have a lot of, for percussion, it's never quite right for me. So that I end up doing custom stuff by just building my own kind of layers in Contact or Hallian that are just sourced from all over the place. Like sometimes I'll take sound effect hits and cut off the whoosh and turn that into actual drums because it's just big enough right away. I'll make those kinds of things. On the plugin processing side, I can't live without Isotope, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. I mean, from Neutron, like the new Neoverb, Ozone figures prominently into the mastering chain. Melda Productions of lots for the creative, just kind of crazy sound design stuff. As long as you have, a degree in computer science.
I mean, yeah, huge. I'm a huge Melda Productions fan. Like the MXX, where you can actually get in and build your own. Yeah, I mean, as long as you're willing to put in the time there. Or I mean, they've got obviously boatloads of presets too. But yeah, Isotope, Heavy. I'm a huge fan of Heaviosity.
Yeah, definitely.
Their libraries are insane. I'm sure you're using what is the drum one? Damage 2 that just came out. I'm sure.
Damage. Yeah. I remember when Damage came out. Like when we were for a while we were both working out of the same studio, and I remember when it first came out, and we just couldn't stop talking about it because I feel like it was like 2010 or 2011 the first one, and it was exactly what we needed.
Yeah. So it was almost going to take your job, essentially. That was revolutionary at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Epic percussive. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. The new one's really cool too. So that's really sweet. I'm sure like you guys like to go for the libraries that are really relying heavily on pristinely recorded material rather than the sort of hybrid, like you said, where it's already distorted and such. And that way you have more control. If it needs to be distorted, you have the 100% control over what is distorted and frequency wise and how much of it and what type of distortion and so on. Can you just fill me in on your process when you're testing out a new library? Like what are you looking for when you're listening to it the first couple of times?
Yeah, I think that's a somewhat easy answer because I found from doing trailers that your average sample library, and this is how it was for years and years and years. I mean, even going back to like the Fairlight, everyone is always trying to get the most accurate recreation of an acoustic instrument. And in trailers, it just doesn't work. I mean, if you take the average like percussion section for like concert music, for sample libraries that, they do a perfect like concert snare and a field snare and a timpani and, ground casa, all that kind of stuff. It just doesn't work in trailers. I mean, it will be just too flat for that kind of music. So when I'm auditioning those libraries, the first thing I say is how big is the signal chain going to need to be that I'm going to need to put on this to get from point A to point B. And that's why I will always prefer a hybrid sound, something that either has maybe a little bit of sound mixed into it or was recorded super present, has like kind of 200 hertz, just like lower mid beef. Like as soon as I hear that, then I'm like, okay, I can definitely work with this. For string libraries, give me the most aggressive spiccato attack, that you can give me, because if the library is too romantic, I'm going to have to transient design the heck out of it, in order to get where I want, or I'm going to have to saturate it or whatever. So when auditioning these type of libraries, it's important for me that they already have somewhat of a hybrid element, or they're really close to that. And I'm not going to have to, bake a ton of stuff into it, because that's time.
Yeah, it always circles back
Yeah,
to time.
yeah, circles back. And I have my go-tos, and I do have some signal chains that, I have my make it beefy signal chain. I have it make it snappy signal chain. Those kinds of things that I can drop on things. But yeah, I mean, it's the more romantic concert type acoustic samples just never end up working. That's you've got to have Larvaries, and that's why I use a lot of Cine samples, because their string spiccato is just the way that I like it. Their short horns are the way that I like it. And and things with, like, you take a synth instrument like Omnisphere. I mean, I can't go wrong. There's so much hybrid, aggressive material in there, and the effects chain built into Omnisphere. There's so many distorting things in there, and so many great filter things. So lots of that, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's pretty much universally loved, Omnisphere.
Yeah,
especially the newer version there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Eric did stuff for Roland starting in the '90s. He's no fool.
Well, I'm wondering if we can kind of switch to maybe less about you guys and your careers, and more about the community here watching and the people who are interested in doing what you do. And maybe if you have any maybe specific advice about where to start, or just things to keep in mind if this is something they seriously want to pursue. I mean, should they learn composition? Should they learn sound design? Should they learn mastering? I mean, if you've got a master in-house, like, essentially give me a checklist of everything you need to know just to even get in the door over there at HiFinesse. If I were looking to get in there, what kind of check boxes would I need to tick to just get a face-to-face with Jez?
Well, I actually made a list.
Oh, yeah.
I want to miss anything.
How long is that list, Jez? Do we have enough time?
Now all these composers are sending me music, and they haven't thought about watching trailers. So I have a little list that I'll refer to here. It might just help keep things focused and less wordy. But I think the most important thing to anyone who's interested in creating music for trailers is just watch a ton of trailers. And don't get, try and separate the visual experience from the auditory experience, and then see how how sympathetic they are with each other. In other words, or exactly how they're working together, and how one works to enhance the other, how potentially the music's sitting in the background as a somewhat invisible but essential part of the whole experience. And because I think what I find with newer budding composers that send us stuff, and we get submissions every day, is that so much music that I'm sent just doesn't honor the concept of an emotional statement that is unified from beginning to end. Music, there are so many ways to compose music. There are so many functions that music has on an emotional level. But basically, when it comes to trailers, the only reason the trailers exist is to entice the audience to buy a ticket to go to the theater, watch the show on TV, whatever. It's basically, the trailer is essentially, sorry, I'm losing my focus, asking us to take that leap of faith and watch something that is, help me out here, Josh. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. It's advertising at the end of the day, and you're trying to give the viewer and listener enough that they're interested without giving away the game. You're casting a line, and you're trying to reel them in and go, wow, I got to see how this ends. I want to see how this develops. And you made the observation again and again about the question.
Yeah.
If you want to phrase it.
Yeah. So I got totally sidetracked here. I think a really good trailer and the music that supports it should be asking a question that's never answered, and that's essential to get people to invest in wanting to watch the production. So we don't want to give the game away. The trailer typically doesn't give the game away. It doesn't give you the final scene. It just leads you on a journey that you want to follow and somehow get into. And the music needs to support that.
Well, I mean, would it be fair to categorize it as this is, it's essentially the 3-arc structure of a story, or the general arc of a story, where it's the setup and then essentially everything up until the climax, but then without the resolution?
Exactly. And
if you approach your music that way, you could depending, obviously, sometimes you just jump right into an action, but maybe slowly, and then you build up, and that's where you get the sort of epic, the epic music genre on Spotify, if you will, where it's a slow build and it's more momentum, and then you just kind of stop and you leave it at that, and that's like, well, what happens next?
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
go to the movie. Yeah.
It's strange because composers, I mean, as composers, we're taught to have these developing motifs that we start out this way, and then we take them on a journey over to the side here, and then we develop that, and then we complete it, and then we go over to another musical idea. And, there's this with trailers. It's and we're taught, like, here's a big cadence, and then we end on the tonic. That's what composers do. But with trailers, you can end literally. I mean, very rarely do I ever end on the starting note, on the tonic. I mean, a lot of times you want to deliberately hang in a place that out of context, you'd be like, wait, I don't understand why it stopped there. So you have to like unlearn a lot of those things as composers.
Creating anticipation. I think that's what I'm just drinking my tea again, so my brain's fine.
No, that's good, Jez. Good.
You want to create anticipation that never resolves and never provides an answer. And if you start going to that, if you find yourself going to that fanfare 5 or subdominant to resolution at the end of your music, then you're shooting in the dark. So. Yeah,
the only time you want to give it a final ending is if you want to like tease it out and then dead silence. Bam! Then it's okay to get a final ending. That's literally one of the only kinds of complete final endings.
And then the editor
and the editor's going to chop it off. That's why you put that space in there.
So we've got. Do your homework, essentially, is what I'm hearing. For Checkpoints 1 is watch thousands of trailers, as many as you can. And there's obviously different genres of trailers, So understanding, maybe I'm going for a romantic picture where I'm trying to entice people sensually, or I'm going for, the Die Hard type where it's just all action and explosions and wife beater T-shirts and so on. Like, what's the next checkbox? Is it? I really am looking forward if it's a sound design approach, if it's creativity, or if it's composition, like a sort of formal training in musical composition. Like, are these things necessary to be successful in the trailer world?
Formal training can either help you or get in the way. From my experience, trailer music production and writing is such a unique beast, and there are plenty of film composers that I've started working with over the years that just haven't managed to get a grip on how to deliver effective trailer music. They're usually providing a lot of articulate narrative for their genre. They're honoring what's going on with picture, but they're not driving the emotion and they're not driving the pace. And so I think that you can get very caught up in theory and experience. And I think it's really important once you start writing trailer music to kind of like throw that to the wayside and look at this process as a much more experimental approach, and just you learn. I'm not saying that you shouldn't understand how harmony works. I think having an acknowledgement of that and studying it, and understanding the difference between a minor chord and a major chord, and a certain type of progression, and how rhythm works, and how melody works to lead us emotionally or doesn't. Or doesn't lead us emotionally.
Right.
But why don't you speak more to that?
I would say that there's nothing specific about this genre when it comes to formal musical training. It's just that it's either gonna hurt or help. That's how it is with jazz. That's how it is with everything. The main value of having that formal knowledge is to be able to have a dialogue about the content and be able to do a dance around it. So you can say, oh yeah, don't go to that thing, where you went down to the sixth chord and back up again. I think you should let it resolve. And if you have that formal training, you can have that conversation and cut through, a lot of wasted time. So having that knowledge and having that understanding is very valuable to have that conversation. You can put things in a framework, but it's important that you don't bring those stylistic inclinations with you. If you, for example, if you have like a conservatory type experience. There's only so much I think that if you're not going to see Bach in a trailer unless it's done for kind of a novelty effect. So it's important to, as with all theory, take it with you and then leave it at the doorstep. bring the parts that are useful, and then hang the rest up.
That pretty much everyone says that, learn the rules and then break all the rules. That is just so frustrating to say when the rules take 18 years to learn. You're like, when can I break them? When can I break them?
But that's why I say it's about being able. You learn that to be able to have a conversation. You don't learn it. You don't learn it so that it teaches you what kind of music to make or what kind of creative decisions to make. And that's the important thing. You learn it so that you understand the theory behind it, so you can have that conversation. And if someone says to you, "Hey, can you do a lead sheet?" "Yes, I can." Or what's the chord you don't like? "Oh, it's this one." "Hey, don't do that second, it's too dissonant." You can have that conversation, but it's not guiding your creative aspiration necessarily. That's the best way that I would put it.
Jez, I have another question, and I think it kind of pertains to the checklist of qualities one needs to have to be in your field. Let's say I have, you make albums, pre-made albums that studios select from. What if I have like 3 just generally unique but very emotive, very essentially, let's put it in quote, perfect pieces of music, and I send them to you? Is that enough? Do I need to be prepared to have a 2-day workaround or a 24-hour period where I need to completely rework something? Is it enough to send someone like HiFinesse a sort of an EP almost of just stuff that I think is ready to go, and perhaps you do too? Or do I need to be prepared for the studio saying, no, we need this to happen and we need to happen tomorrow?
You're talking about from the perspective of a composer trying to get noticed by us, for example, or
yes, exactly,
for a specific job.
Send to you just to try to get the foot in the door, but sure, knowing full well that I don't have the experience or the wherewithal to turn something around so quickly if you needed to. Is it even worth me sending it?
I don't think that's essential, especially when you're getting into the game initially. That is the most important thing, is to provide music submissions that are as good as they can be in a field that you truly understand and that you excel in. For example, if you're a hip-hop producer, I wouldn't suggest, unless you've studied classical orchestration, I wouldn't suggest trying to compete with the big orchestral epic hybrid cues that we typically put out for those big tempo movies. Even if you really just are excited by the genre, focus on hip-hop and see how you can translate that into a trailer-friendly format. Understand what your strengths are and put your best foot forward. I get so many submissions from composers that have about 5 or 6 different styles in a folder of 10 tracks, and I don't have time to listen to 10 tracks. When somebody sends me something, I'll needle drop 5 or 6 seconds at a time. If I hear something that resonates for me, or I get a sense that it's worth listening more, I'll listen to that one cue perhaps in its entirety. But even if I really like that particular style or genre from that particular composer, I won't necessarily be able to give the same amount of time and attention to his other styles of music, So I think just to get your foot in the door, send your best 3, maybe 4 cues at the most. And if you want to provide, if you really do believe that you have strengths in different areas of production, then send 1 example from each of those and choose your best cue. And that'll start a document.
You mentioned to me actually before we jumped on stream that you're getting a lot of people sending essentially recreations of popular themes in music theory, not music theory, trailer music. I want to get your kind of hot take on some of those, because I've noticed some trends. Obviously, there's the Brahm, and this is kind of actually going away a little bit, which I personally am happy to see. I mean, it got too much too fast, I think. Another one is the sort of remix ballad style of a popular piece of music with very light, depressing, scary, sometimes piano behind it. This is another theme that's kind of going on, and maybe this is going away now too. Maybe if I can get your take on those, and what would make you, as someone who's already involved, to decide to go one theme or another, or just try to go completely unique? Like, what's the balance there? Like, I mean, how do you feel about those things?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that there will always be trends in the industry, and those trends are established and developed because of the need to provide a specific function. The Brahm is that great big announcement, heavyweight component in a trailer that just enunciates a specific motion or provides gravity to a certain scene. And those kind of devices will always be important in trailers. And so even though Brahms have been taking a bit of a backseat to other original elements that perform the same function, the need for those kind of moments in trailer music is always going to be there. So those, I think that, yeah, you're right. Brahms have kind of like taken a backseat to more original. I was watching this Greyhound trailer recently. It's a little bit old now,
Yeah.
but I think that's a really great example of a recent trailer. It was an Apple TV Plus trailer, and it's a fairly straightforward piece of music, but it uses this really haunting, at least 2, maybe even 3 different sound designy elements that are repetitive throughout the piece, and they're replacing the Brahm in terms of the function they're providing. And I couldn't tell you how they're made. When I hear something that sounds like it might be a combination of a voice, but I can't quite tell whether it's a horn, that grabs me right away and pulls me in to the trailer. It's compelling. It's providing depth to the story, and that's what we're asked to provide all the time. I probably had over the years 100 requests for the new Brahm. Just give us the new Brahm.
That's it. That's all you need to do.
Signature sound is the word people are frequently use. We need some kind of signature that gives the trailer a fingerprint, and that's essentially what the Brahm is doing. Is it's giving you a specific sonic fingerprint. So even while that's kind of taking more of a back seat, people are still going to use that general device of having a single recognizable signature in the pieces.
And that's a branding thing. And it really helps the studio establish a unique identity for the trailer and the movie. And who knows, sometimes maybe that can make its way into the final score as well. It's happened a few times over the years, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, where they like the trailer so much, people are like, why isn't this in the movie yet?
Well, that's fantastic. Has that happened for you guys before?
I can't take credit for that. If I did, I'd probably be breaking some kind of like NDA. I do like to think that it's happened over the years when we've been involved in a trailer that came out a year before the music was actually scored. Yeah, some aspect of that might have made its way into the composer's psyche and became a part of the score, but that may be complete coincidence.
I see. Well, that's cool, man. Even if you can't disclose, Jez, I'm sure it's happened, and that's just really cool. I've got another question about using a piece of pop music in a trailer, and maybe versus using a piece of pop music in a movie. And this is something I think about quite often. When I hear it in the movie, I'm almost instantly taken out of the story. Because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not in that world anymore. I'm in my world, and I know that music. But then when I think about it used in a trailer, I think about it, I'm instantly going to connect with the trailer rather, you know what I mean? I think it's a different dynamic because in a trailer, you've got 30 seconds to a minute and a half to do it. And if I have a piece of pop music that is, on the tip of the culture's tongue, then it's instantly you're going to connect with so many people, and then you can go from there. I was just wondering what your take is on that, and I'm guessing that you have very little say on if you can use a piece of pop music in a trailer. Like either the studio comes to you with Led Zeppelin, or you're on your own and you need to make something original.
Yeah, those kind of creative ideas for either covers or remixes always come from the client. We don't generally go out and spec remix stuff or spec. We do some spec covers, I guess.
Yeah. Covers, but the thing to keep in mind, always keep in mind with an out of context placement of a pop track is budget. I mean that
license.
Blow the budget for this because they're basically saying yes, we are comfortable with negotiating with whoever the owner of that master is for securing a license for that. That would be way beyond us to say, hey, we've got this great idea. stones. Seriously, you should, for the price of a Southern California house, you can get this in, you know.
Well, what about just specifically, instead of, I mean, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about that being used in the trailer, just in general, whether it be from HiFinesse or a different trailer house? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I enjoy those opportunities because to be honest, they give you somewhat of a creative breather. They give you a structure and an idea and a roadmap to follow, and you can kind of turn off your "is this good enough" part of your brain and just focus on having fun with it. You know, because the roadmap is there, the tempo is there, the feel is there. You're just kind of playing off of it. You know, and that's a very low pressure, highly creative place to be for me personally. You know, because there'll be plenty of other times when, you know, I can put all of the burden on myself to like come up with something no one's heard before, you know. So I enjoy those. I like that.
And unlike other remixes, I think, you know, typically if you're remixing music in the music world, specifically just for listening and not for using in trailers, then you're really trying to like generate your own, put your own imprint on it and create something that fits into a specific genre, whether it's a dance track, or a ballad, or a glitch, or whatever, or any kind of remix. Essentially, what you're doing is generating the whole thing to turn some heads somewhere. And essentially, that's the same thing we're doing in trailers too. But we've given a framework of guidance from the studio, from the trailer house, and they'll come to us and say, okay, so we're working on this horror film, and here's the song. If we're going to do a cover of it, then it has to be in this general ballpark style.
Right.
If we're working on a big epic kind of Marvel type thing, then typically it's going to be, you know, needing some orchestra, some rhythmic additions, and so it's quite an interesting way to approach a remix, because you're not just serving the music itself, it's serving the final project and acknowledging how that'll fit with the film.
Yeah, definitely. Nice. And there's fun nerd stuff too. I mean, one time we had. They were trying to send us stems of a classic 70s track to work with. And they're like, hold on a second. The engineer is down in the archives, like taking off the tape and use the stem of, you know, and it was a major artist. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, what? Because they didn't have stems because it was recorded, you know, 50 years ago. And, you know, so there's fun like that occasionally. You know, and you get to hear, you know, the artist coughing in between the takes, you know, and everything.
And so sort of like those NDA conversations that were recorded 5 feet away from the microphone that maybe you shouldn't have heard. Yeah. That's why. I mean, I just would assume that'd be cool to begin with, just, you know, trailer music or otherwise, to be able to put your hands on a Led Zeppelin track just out of the gate. Is like, you know, it's a dream I'm sure you had as a kid, you know, that I still have, guys. I'm going to be honest with you.
Years ago, about 3 years ago, Josh, you didn't work on it. I didn't work on it personally. I was just overseeing it. We had an opportunity to remix a Beatles track. And when the trailer house first came to us, I was like, hold on a second. The Beatles have never been in a trailer.
Yeah.
You know, that's hallowed territory. And it was a fairly obscure, well, not obscure, fairly well-known song, the Because song. Because, I won't sing it because I can't sing it.
Don't sing it. I don't want to get copyright strike, okay? Don't even hum it, Jez.
It was a really interesting choice for this particular movie, which was a science fiction kids movie called Valerian. And when it was first suggested, apart from initially balking at it and asking if the studio was going to pay for it, which apparently they were committed to, I was curious about artistically, you know, how this could work. But it actually ended up integrating with the visuals perfectly. It was this big science fiction-y, otherworldly, super animated sort of hybrid environment, and the song brought this perfect nuance to the picture, to the trailer, and really enhanced it in a big way.
And that was Josh's work?
No, it wasn't Josh, and it wasn't me. It was another guy we worked with. But the idea, I believe, was generated by the music supervisor initially, and kudos to her for bringing that to the table and having a vision to see how this could work.
That's awesome. So, I mean, we're running up on an hour here, but I have some just sort of rapid fire questions for you, if you don't mind. So, Jez, for you, your the best trailer or the trailer you're most proud of, either maybe that you had hands on or just from HiFinesse in general?
I think
give me one or two.
Has to go back to the very first Thor teaser trailer. It was our first opportunity to work on a Marvel project, and it was my first opportunity to work on a big trailer. And I'd already recorded most of the music for most of this track for a specific album, which we called Harder Than Nails. It was a kind of homage in an indirect way to a Nine Inch Nails style rock guitar thing. And I presented that to the music supervisor and got the call and was like, hey, we really like it, but we need some orchestra added on top of it, because that's kind of the feel for this trailer. And scrambled and called a couple, because at that time I didn't really work with anybody that had strengths in orchestration. Got hold of a composer who added some strings and horns and brass on top of it, sent it into the trailer house, got some notes. And it was a very collaborative process. It wasn't, like, we like this track, we're going to use it in this trailer, you'll get the quote request from the studio. This was like for me in the early days, super exciting. And then, of course, to see it placed in the trailer. And that opened the door for the Marvel stuff, I think.
Did you see it in the theater?
Did, yes. Absolutely, I did, yeah.
Oh, amazing, I bet.
There's occasions where I walked into the theater, and it's only happened a couple of times. Somebody in the industry told me that if you go to the theater manager and you say, hey, I don't want to watch the whole film, but I really want to see the trailer, they'll actually let you, stand in the back of the theater and then leave off the trailers away. I think I might have done it.
Did you name drop, Jez? Did you say it's my music, so you should let me in?
I don't want to make a big deal about it.
Yeah, that's wild, man. That's so cool. What about you, Jez? I'm sure there are many projects, but if you just want to give me one or two that you're most sort of proud of.
Yeah, I think the first one is always the sweetest. I think my first big placement was Wolf of Wall Street, and I had a big orchestral thing that was part of that campaign, and that was big for me because that was kind of my first big one. But then there's a totally random one that we did a couple of years ago for the show Curb Your Enthusiasm. Oh, okay. They wanted. There's if you've seen the show, there's that kind of strumming. They had this concept. The studio and the trailers had this concept to turn it into like a Dark Knight spoof.
Okay.
We're going through the alleys. There's only one man, and they wanted to do a version of the Curb Your Enthusiasm scene, but do it all Hans Zimmer dark, and without giving the melody away.
While big reverby. That's what I picture.
Exactly. And we ended up doing that, and it worked out really well. And they played it. We did all the music, and they did the VFX before they did the actual filming. That ends in Larry David seeing the light show up in the sky, but it's his face instead of the bat symbol.
Classic.
They recorded all the audio, and then they played it on set while they were filming him. And he heard it, and the producer told us that he laughed really hard when he heard the final product, and I was like, okay, well, I made Larry David laugh. I can die happy.
Yeah, that's a check. That's a check off the bucket list for sure.
Because I'm just a trailer composer. How am I going to make Larry David laugh? I'm not. I don't have that.
But you do, and you did.
Yeah, I did. So I'm done. I can die happy, and here we go.
Another rapid fire question is kind of a two-part. Is how many trailers do you watch a day, or if it's in a week? And what are some of your favorites that you've seen outside of your particular trailer, like people you want to kind of give credit to? Because, I'm sure it's a very competitive business, but I'm sure you see game recognizes game, as they say. So if you want to give us a few that you saw, you respect, and maybe we should go check out.
I don't really watch a bunch of trailers. I kind of have to force myself to sit down every week or two. I have my assistant compile a list of standout trailers that she's noticed and researched over the last couple of weeks, and have a little session. And the luxury of having distance from the actual involvement in them and just be a spectator. And there are trailers that blow me away all the time. I think for me, usually, obviously, because of the music and how the music's involved, there was a I'm going to look at my list here. I'm going to look, Josh, why don't you answer it while I... Sorry, man, the coffee still hasn't kicked in.
The new Batman that came out a couple weeks ago that I'm just really digging it, where it's kind of the same vibe as the Joker film that came out earlier, where it's just, he's an anti-hero, and it starts out with some sound design with some duct tape, then it goes into a Nirvana track, and then there's some sound design type orchestral stuff that weaves out of the Nirvana track. And it's just a really compelling, I thought just a really compelling trailer. It's dark, it's weird, it's twisted. You're a little worried for Batman, It's like, is he mentally ill? It's cool. I think the way that it was done with the sound and the whole bit was really awesome.
This is the one with the new one with the Twilight guy.
Yeah, it's the brand new one. Yeah, it's not Ben Affleck or any of that stuff. It's yeah, exactly.
Robert Pattinson. That was his name.
Yeah, and it's really bizarre, and his eyes are all bloodshot, and he's pale and weird, and yeah, it's cool.
Nice. Yes.
I looked at my notes and I found I discovered the trailer I wanted to bring up. It's quite old now. The Mission Impossible 6 Fallout trailer that used a remix of Imagine Dragons' Friction, and it's been, I think, a couple of years, but the way that they integrated that particular remix into the Mission Impossible theme was incredible. Right off the get-go, I'm like, I know I'm watching Mission Impossible here. Am I listening to the Mission Impossible Layla Schifrin theme here, or is this an original track? It was so well done that it could have been score to the picture, but it was a remix. And yeah, that's one of my favorite examples of a really solid approach and inventive and creative. Must have involved a lot of collaboration between the editor and the music house that works in it. I don't know who did the remix, but it was genius.
So when you hear a trailer like that, do you jump into the credits to find out who's doing these things? Maybe jump on a call to find out the behind the scenes? Like, I mean, or are you like regular consumers are just like, yeah, that's a great trailer, and that's kind of where you leave it, and you kind of like unsung heroes in that regard? I'm just wondering, as a hero yourself, do you try to look for the other heroes?
When I see something that's really compelling that has a trademark style to it, I'll sometimes ask suppose or imagine that it might have been a specific trailer house, and I'll do a little bit of background research. I'll go to LinkedIn, I'll go to their website and see if it actually was them. There are some creative agencies around town that have a very specific style, like AV Squad and Motion and Trailer Park and Create. And the editors they work with and the producers that spearhead their campaigns do specific things. So it's more a curiosity thing, not necessarily to boost business per se, but yeah.
That's cool. Okay, guy. Well, I mean, I don't want to take up any more of your time. We marked down an hour. We've gone a little bit past it. I know you're busy. I know you've gotten, I think, 3 or 4 emails, Jez, since we started.
Yeah.
So that they might be 6-hour turnarounds that we've held you back from. So I do want to thank you. I do want to commend you for the work that you've done, both of you. I mean, I almost always enjoy trailers more than the actual film, so I appreciate you for that. And it's almost certainly because of the music. So I mean, great job, and I appreciate you taking the time to fill me in and fill everybody else here in on the stream with a kind of it's just so involved with everybody's lives, but I very rarely do you hear people talking about it. You do more and more, though. Trailers are really becoming more of a focus point for a lot of people, which I think is cool. But thank you for kind of pulling the curtain back for us and sharing a bit of your world.
Yeah, thanks for giving us an opportunity to talk about it. Obviously, we don't talk about it enough. I've had a problem connecting with what I wanted to say today a little bit, but
did great.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having us.
No, yeah, it's really great to be able to. Sometimes it really is useful to actually take a step back and ask yourself, why am I doing this, and what's the bigger picture stuff? Because we don't contemplate these things as we're working away against deadlines, and it's really great to be able to talk about it. And thanks for giving us that opportunity.
Thank you very much. I'll let you go, and hopefully we can talk again soon. Maybe meet up at NAMM next year.
Oh yeah,
you're gonna go. I'll be there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Post-apocalypse.
Yes. Write the trailer for that, please. Write the trailer for the end of that. I need to see it. I need to be uplifted. Let me just give you some notes here. All right, fellas. Thank you very much. And like I said, hopefully I'll talk to you soon. All right?
Sounds good.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh. Later.
Bye-bye. Bye. You can go ahead and hang up. Yep. Perfect. All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. That was Jez and Josh from the HiFinesse Trailer House. Links to their website in the description. I saw someone asking how you could send music to them. There's probably an email or a submission form on their site. You can also check out all of their credits, which will make your mind explode. Really, really talented people over there. There's more composers than just Josh as well. So definitely check into it. If trailers is something you're interested in pursuing professionally, definitely go to their website and check it out. And also, just to let you know, we got more live streams coming up this month. Next Tuesday, we're going to be talking to Tommy Prophet, 10 times, I think, platinum by now, producer. Really big credits to his name. He's got a bunch of music placements in video games and film, and he's the main producer for NF, which is one of the biggest hip-hop acts on YouTube. So subscribe if you're not already, hit that bell notification, and pop by here next Tuesday to check out that live stream and ask your questions of Tommy. But in the meantime, I'm Joshua Casper. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next video.